Good afternoon. Welcome to the News at 4 on channel 1738A.
Today, we're going to be talking about a very serious trial dated back in the early 1930s. But first, let me introduce you to David, who will be explaining our background in that time.
Okay, I'm going to be talking about the background of the early 1930s. Okay, so let's start with the economics. Now, the economics during the early 1930s, were not good. The Great Depression was just starting, so the economy was not good at all. The country's GNP had dropped dramatically during that time, and industrial production fell more than half of the average. And automobile production also dropped by 2/3. That's bad. Okay, now to the music of the early 1930s. Some famous music during that time was Good Night, Sweetheart by Wayne King and his orchestra, Tiger Rag by the Mills Brothers, By the River, St. Marie by Guy Lombardo and his Royal Canadians, Dream a Little Dream of Me by Wayne King and his orchestra. Now on to the literature of the 1930s. Famous pieces during that time were The Good Earth by Earl S. Buck, Light in August by William Faulkner, The Waves by Virginia Woolf, and Hayter's Castle by A.J. Cronin. I think it's Hatters. Okay, now on to the films. These films are pretty famous. I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys know these. There's Frankenstein, which is directed by James Whale, and Dracula, directed by Todd Browning and Carl Freund. You guys know that, of course. But then there's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, directed by Rudin Mamoulian. Okay, now to the fashion. This is where it gets pretty nice. The men were dressing up nice, wearing fedoras and double-breasted overcoats. The boys would wear short shorts and long socks. Now the women, they would wear dresses and keep their hair close to their head. Fur and floral patterns were a famous trend during that time. Although hats for women were still popular, they were becoming less popular.
Go.
Okay, so the education in the 1930s was average during this time. But once the Great Depression took its full swing, education became poor. Funding for public schools greatly suffered, which led to schools closing, teacher layoffs, and lower salaries for school staff during that time. For employment during that time, during the presidency of Herbert Hoover, more than 13 million people lost their jobs. Unemployment shot up from 1930 to 1931, and it eventually peaked at an astonishing 24.9% during 1932. The roles of women. The Great Depression didn't really change the role of women. Almost 11 million women were employed during 1930. Out of all the professional women, 3/4 were school teachers or nurses. Some important events during this time was in 1930, white South African women got the right to vote, and in 1931, Jane Addams received the Nobel Prize for Peace. Also in 1932, Amelia Earhart became the first woman to fly across the Atlantic Ocean and across the country. Alright, now back to me and Kayla.
Now we are going to be talking about the fight for doomed Negroes. In a German communist paper's play Up Americans Cause New Riots Occur. This happened in Berlin on July 1st, 1931. Communist newspapers, to which may be attributed responsibility for recent mob attacks on the American consulates at Dresden and Leipzig, are making a capital of the Scottsboro convictions. They are fervently appealing to Reds everywhere to save the victims of judicial murder, asserting that Negroes are wholly innocent of the crimes for which they are sentenced. A gang of young communists smashed a half-dozen windows of the American Consulate General in Bellevue Street late last night. Police captured 5.
Following communist rioting in the East Side, in which one policeman was shot dead, Berlin's chief of police banned the huge international communist athlete meet scheduled for next Sunday. 8 Negroes from Tennessee and Georgia were sentenced in Scottsboro, Atlanta on April 9th to die in the electric chair for attacks on 2 white girls of Huntsville, Atlanta.
basically, what we just read was about the Scottsboro trial, which is one of the most famous cases in American court, which involves 8 African American men who were accused of assault by 2 white males and rape by 2 white females.
The text directly states 8 Negroes from Tennessee and Georgia were sentenced in Scottsboro, Alabama on April 9th to die in electric chairs for attacks on 2 white girls in Huntsville, Alabama. And so this quote is explaining the sentencing of 8 of the Scottsboro boys who were accused of raping the 2 girls, even though everyone thinks they're innocent. And this quote is important because it informs us about the 8 gentlemen who were accused and all about them and their sentencing.
So, the solution to our problem is to stop racism. It happened back then and it still continues to happen today. Just because people have different skin tones than us, it doesn't mean that they can be labeled as a bad person or as a criminal. In conclusion, treat everyone with the respect and equality that they deserve, and this world will be a better place. And now to David with the weather!
It's cold!